We've waited a long time for Acura to bring back a Type S branded vehicle here in America. The last one left the States in 2008, and as you guys saw in my last video, I drove this car out at Laguna Seca in California, where it proved to be a surprisingly decent track car, despite the fact that it was designed to be more of a road car. So as you can see, this week Acura has loaned me for a few days a 2021 TLX Type S painted in this stunning shade of Apex Blue with that gorgeous red leather interior. And for this video, I'm going to do things a little bit different. I'm going to retest the 0 to 60 time. We're going to do a fuel economy test. And at the end of this video, we're going to find out what the new TLX Type S is like to live with as a daily driver. Now, before we get into the new TLX Type S, I want to first remind you guys where the Type S name comes from. And to do that, I'm in a 2008 TL Type S. This is actually the same black Type S that I reviewed for the channel a year ago. It belongs to my very, very good friend Keith. And this particular pristine example only has 48,000 miles on it. It had a 3.5 liter V6 back then, making 286 horsepower. This one has the 5-speed automatic. You could get it with a 6-speed manual that had a limited slip diff. 0 to 60 times are around the 6-second mark, so let's go ahead and see if this one still can deliver on those numbers before we test the new Type S. And you know what? For a car that is 13 years old, 0 to 60 in 6.26 seconds is pretty darn respectable. Now, obviously, the new TLX Type S is going to be faster than this. You guys saw in my first video, I got 4.7 seconds, but we're gonna see what I can do on my local roads because I would like to retest that car and see what it can do. But you know what? This thing still sounds really good. This one has a cold air intake installed and that V6 just loves to sing. The 5-speed auto is probably the weakest link with this car. It is a little slow to shift at times. But when it does finally find the lower gear, with that intake, you really hear the VTEC crossover at around 5,000 RPM, something you cannot hear in the new Type S because the engine doesn't have VTEC, because it doesn't really need VTEC because of the turbo. This car still does have paddles on the wheel. You actually have to slap it over into manual mode here. And you know what? Back in the day, this actually did a pretty good job of rev matching. I'm still very impressed, and what also is equally impressive is the steering in this car. This was BMW Direct at the time. Very heavy, very full of feedback. Direct. The suspension also was stiffened on this model. We have these 17-inch wheels. This very much was the pinnacle of front-wheel drive handling performance back in the day. Really, you wanted this car with a 6-speed manual because of the limited slip differential. Without it, you can roast the front tires pretty well. And as you guys saw, this thing won't actually shift when you forget that you left it in manual mode. But it'll bounce off the limiter, and it sounds really good. I like the way this car drives still. It's amazing to me how well this car still drives. But with all that said, let's hop into the new Type S, because this car here creates some pretty big shoes to fill for that new model. All right, so because I already filmed the TLX Type S very thoroughly in my first and second video of this vehicle when I was in California, I figured for this video I'm going to skip my usual parts and kind of get to the portions of the video where I didn't get a chance to test this car on a longer, basis, because I have the car for a couple days. Now, the first thing is first, I want to test out the 0 to 60 time because, as you guys have stated in the comments, I have kicked out my apparently fat camera guy. So now we can actually get a sense for what this car would do. My previous video, I got 4.73 seconds. That was the best 0 to 60 time. Now, well, I'm pretty happy with that number. I just got 4.58 seconds 0 to 60. And Acura says this car would do it in around 5 seconds. So that's a pretty impressive number. Very impressive number indeed. Just to be sure, we're going to go in the opposite direction and get another 0 to 60 time. So on this run, although we are going slightly uphill, I got 5.11 seconds. So if you kind of average out the two, you're around the 4.7 second mark that I got in my first video. So even though I had the camera guy in the car, didn't really make too much of a difference, although the 4.58 second is very nice on going on a slight downhill. We're talking about like a less than 2% hill. So this is still very, very impressive numbers. It should match the timing that you'll get for something like a Genesis G70 or a Kia Stinger. Definitely going to be slower than something like the BMW M340i and the Mercedes C43. Probably similar to something like an Audi S4 though. But of course, now that we have the TLX Type S here on my local roads just outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, this car in general is a very, very impressive car. It was very impressive out on the track when I was out in California, but now that I have it here on my local roads, I'm able to get a sense for what this car is like to drive on a daily basis, because I'm going to use this car you know, like how an owner would. They would use it to go to and from work, they would use it to do errands, and you'd also want to be able to have a little fun, because that's the whole point of a Type S model branded vehicle. It's supposed to be a performance-oriented car that you can also drive on a daily basis. It's not going to beat you up the way a Type R would, although I will argue that the current Civic Type R really isn't that bad. It's just not the softest car, whereas this car tries to blend the performance with the luxury. And I still love the sound of this vehicle. The TLX Type S definitely gets louder when it's in Sport Plus. I have it in Sport Plus right now, and you really get a sense that Acura tuned the engine note of this car. You hear a lot of induction howl. You hear a nice little pop and a slight crackle from the exhaust when this vehicle shifts gears. Remember, the transmission, the 10-speed auto in this car, shifts up to 30% quicker versus the same transmission in the standard TLX with the 2-liter engine. There's no manual available. Super handling all-wheel drive is still standard. This car will give you the ability to let the tail step out very, very slightly. And remember, this is still a front drive, transverse mounted engine, but it amazes me how well this car feels dynamically. And you know, 0 to 60 numbers are important and everything, but this car feels really quick. It has a very, very broad torque curve. The peak torque of 354 begins at like 1600 RPM, and it keeps pulling all the way to like 6000. The Redline on this car is around 6300 RPM, which is low by Acura Honda standards. However, remember, this is a modern twin scroll design, turbocharged direct injection double overhead cam V6. It really doesn't share anything with the old J series engine, even though this has a J series name in the block. In general, it just feels very similar to a German car. It feels like it feels very similar to the last Audi S4 that I drove, or I even had an SQ5 before this vehicle, and it had very similar power characteristics from its engine. It's such a joy of an engine, such a lovely powertrain in general. This car just kind of begs you to go faster, yet when you drive it normally, it feels so comfortable and so luxurious that you kind of forget that you're driving a Type S branded car at times. I mean, the seats, these are the 16-way seats that you get in the advanced model, and they have the ability to adjust the bolster a little bit, but they're still just as comfortable, they're just as supportive, and they hold you in place a little bit nicely. I like how Acura did include, you know, stuff from the advanced package TLX into this model, although it didn't include all the features. But some of you, again, may be a little bit confused on where the Type S fits, not only in the Acura lineup, but also in the lineup of sports sedans in general. So the enthusiast in me wants to compare the TLX to the benchmark sports sedan in this segment, which I actually happen to have with me today. That's right, the big nostriled BMW over there is the new 2021 BMW M3. Now, Acura doesn't want us to actually compare the Type S to an M3. They want us to compare it to an M340i. However, I want to go over the styling of this car while I have it side by side with the BMW to see if the company did enough to make the Type S stand out as a performance sports sedan. Now, of course, in typical Acura fashion, they are a tad conservative with the upgrades they've made to the Type S, but I think that they also were very tasteful as opposed to overdoing it, which they did on the 4th generation TL back in 2009 with the beak. The Type S, the TLX, the 2nd generation, definitely looks very elegant. It looks good from any angle, Whereas you look at something like the new M3 where it has this massive grille. Now I will admit, the grille on the BMW has grown on me and it does look good when it's on the road. It's only when it's standing still, it could really use the European plate to kind of break it up. But as you can see, this one here is painted in Apex Blue. The Type S gives you those features like the open pore diamond pentagon. You have the diamond pentagon grille with the black surround. No actual LED fog lights on the Type S, but you have that unique black painted front splitter. It would be nice if Acura offered it in like a carbon finish, which my guess it'd be pricey. There's the dual eye LED headlights on the Acura, and of course you have this Type S badge to the side, which in contrast you can see this BMW is around $40,000 more expensive than the Acura. Does it look $40,000 more expensive? I'll let you guys be the judge of that in the comments below. This car does have things like BMW's laser headlights, no fog lights as well, but you do have a lot of functional grille openings. Now, here's the problem with the TLX in general when you compare it to a lot of its competitors. This car is big. As you can see here, the BMW was about 5 inches longer this year for this new generation at 189 inches long. This is about the same size as the TL Type S from 2008. The Acura, in comparison, is around 194 inches long. It's 4 inches longer than a Kia Stinger and 5 inches longer than the BMW. And you can really tell this is a much bigger car. And it's bigger than mostly all of its competitors. It's more like a BMW 5 Series, even though it's priced like a 3 Series. I do love the wheels on this car, though. These are the $800 Y-spoke NSX inspired wheels with the Brembo brakes. These are the Pirelli P0 summer tires. They are a little bit noisier than the All Seasons, but this car has so much grip, way more grip versus a TLX A-Spec. And you can see there are black painted mirrors. You have a standard sunroof above, and at the back you can see, if you'd like, Acura will sell you these blacked out emblems, which I think would really make this rear look a lot better. The quad outlet exhaust also looks fantastic, and you'd think that Acura wouldn't be able to hold a candle to the BMW's quad outlet exhaust, but the actual pipe diameters appear to be a little bit larger actually versus the one that you find on the M3. But remember, this is a car that's technically a step above the TLX, but to have them parked side by side, it's interesting to see how well the Acura actually looks styling-wise compared to the Beamer. So as much as I would like to compare the TLX Type S to a BMW M3, I didn't technically get permission from Acura to do it, and it would also be a pointless comparison test because the BMW is easily almost twice the price of this TLX Type S. So if it was an M340i, maybe we could talk, but I just wanted to show you guys just how aggressive looking the Type S looks. And it actually does hold a candle to something like that M3. I mean, this is a better looking car from some angles, especially if you're gonna stare at the front grille of that BMW. It's absolutely hideous. This Acura just looks well proportioned. It looks almost like a rear drive car. It is just a little too big. Just like the TL of 2 generations ago, this vehicle is a tweener car. It is a little bit too long, a little bit too wide to be taken, extremely seriously as a track car. But for those of you who want a mid-size car or on the bigger end of a mid-size car, but you don't want to have to, pay for that and you want more compact car pricing, this is where the TLX Type S fits. It's a pity, however, though, that the back seat of the Type S and the TLX in general is very small. It is very small considering how big this car is. Acura didn't really prioritize interior space with this vehicle, and that's because they wanted it to have a very stiff chassis. They wanted the handling to be incredibly stiff and just composed and inspiring confidence and whatnot. And this car definitely does that. It's going to, be a really easy car to daily drive. Now, speaking of which, daily driving, let's briefly put this car into just its normal setting because I want to talk about how it drives just normally. When you have it in its normal setting, or in fact, I'll go to comfort. We'll go to comfort setting. This car has the adaptive dampers that you get from the advanced model, although they've really upped the adjustability in the Type S model. So you can really feel the steering gets nice and light. The suspension shocks get very, very soft. Not incredibly soft, but a lot softer in comfort mode. And this vehicle just reminds you that it's a luxury sedan, and that's kind of the whole point when you buy a vehicle in this segment. It stays relatively quiet, although this particular one here with the performance tires, these are Pirelli summer tires, they are noisier than the all seasons you would get. So if you guys plan to drive this car in all weather, I'd recommend skipping this option for $800, although the Y-spoke wheels that are NSX inspired, I love these wheels. They're also lightweight. So again, you're gonna have to put up with a little more noise if you guys are gonna go for the summer tire package. But You know, other than that, visibility is good. You have those massive hood bulges in the hood, which do, you know, take some getting used to. But, you know, aside from that, you look out of the front, the side, the back. Acura Watch, their driver assistance stuff is all standard on the Type S model. That's still an option on even that $90,000 BMW. It doesn't have adaptive cruise control, where this Acura has it, and it costs basically half the price. So as a daily driver, you know, just having this car for a couple of days, it is a really, really comfortable car. So you don't lose any of that, you know, stuff that you get from the regular TLX by going with the Type S branded car. Now, in terms of fuel economy, this vehicle is rated to get 19 in the city and 24 on the highway. Premium gas is going to be required, obviously. And in my week's worth of testing on the highway, I actually did a little bit better. I got around 26 mpg on the highway, which is pretty good. On the city, this is where the car would probably was doing like around 18, especially with my heavy right foot. But it's nice to know that the Acura does do a little bit better than its EPA numbers. It's still not as strong as what you're going to get from like the newest BMW M340. Or even like an Audi S5 Sportback, but this is going to basically match the fuel economy of a Kia Stinger or a Genesis G70. Fuel economy is not, you know, obviously a priority. Honda and Acura, they like to make sure their engines are very, very clean, obviously emission-wise. But you didn't buy this car because you were trying to save gas. You bought it because you wanted to have some fun. Now, that being said, if I was in the market for a sports sedan like this, would I have the TLX Type S at the very top of my list? Well, that really depends. It depends on what your priorities are, because I don't like how this TLX has a pretty cramped back seat and the trunk is small, even by, you know, sedan standards. It's kind of small. Now, if I was a huge Honda and Acura fan, which back in the day I was, this would be easily at the top of my list. But the biggest threat, I think, to the TLX probably is the Koreans. I haven't driven the refreshed Kia Stinger. It should still drive just as well as the old one. The Stinger represents a huge bargain still. You know, for around the same prices as Acura, you do get some features that are missing from the TLX. I'm talking about like a heads-up display, power opening and closing trunk, surround view 360 camera, heated back seats, heated steering wheel. Those features are not available on the Type S because Acura doesn't offer the advanced package, all of the advanced package goodies on this car. They gave you some of it, about half, but they didn't give you the stuff that, you know, people really would want and would probably pay an extra couple thousand for. Basically, for $54,000 that this one is, it's still a good deal cheaper than the Germans. Easily a lot cheaper. But for a little bit more, for around the same money, and for similar performance, you get a similar sized back seat, more trunk space, and a look that also continues to stand out. The Stinger is hard to ignore, simply hard to ignore. So that's the car that I'd want to get together with and do a direct comparison test with this. Because even though the Germans are what Acura was targeting, which is fair, this car could easily hold a candle to those German vehicles. The Koreans have really been shaking up the segment, and I think that's what's going to continue to force other auto manufacturers to push the envelope in terms of value, in terms of tech, in terms of luxury, in terms of performance. And the Acura certainly has caught up. Acura had a very, very poor following. They were falling behind so bad over the last decade, and this car just pushes them leaps and bounds ahead. Hasn't really surpassed anybody, but it is definitely worth a huge consideration if you guys want a sports sedan like this. And really, it gets me excited for the next evolution of Type S, because MDX Type S is coming later this summer, and I would love it if Acura would do an RDX Type S with this powertrain. It would probably sell like hotcakes, especially with this turbo V6 and the lighter chassis. Or even an ILX Type S. I'd love to see Acura do a compact sports sedan that's built off of the Civic Type R, but with more luxury and a dual clutch transmission. But my quibbles with this car are very few and far between. Still don't love the screen. The screen in this car could be larger, and it could also be a touchscreen. I really think Acura should just make it a touchscreen. The true touchpad stuff works okay, but it's still not going to be as easy to use as a touchscreen. I think that's what most people want. But other than that, I see Acura really doing well, and if you guys are in the market for one of these, I hear dealers are charging a pretty penny, as they should. It's the return of the Type S branded vehicle after more than a decade. So after spending the last few days with the TLX Type S, I have to say I am very impressed with the overall package. I mean, I really liked this car when I first drove it when I was out in California, but after spending some time with it in my local area, driving it as a daily driver, Acura has delivered a very well thought out package here. This car is comfortable, this car is fast, this car is stylish, this car is full of the latest tech features that most would want, minus the advanced package that I think they should offer. And really, if you guys are in the market for a gas-powered, twin turbocharged, all-wheel drive sports sedan, this car should be at the very top of your list. I would easily pick it over the German entries, but really what stops me from giving it my very full recommendation are the Korean offerings. The Genesis G70 and the Kia Stinger are still very enticing options. However, if you guys are looking for something that's fast, that's comfortable, that's going to be reliable, that's also built well, this car is definitely at the very top of the list. And it gets me excited, of course, for the next generation of Acura products. I should be driving the MDX Type S soon. I'm hoping that Acura will follow it up with an RDX Type S, because a Type S brand of that vehicle would do extremely well. And for around $52,800 for the base version, add $800 for those wheels, you're looking at around $54,000 for this one. The Type S is definitely a great deal, still around 10 to 15 grand cheaper than most of the competitors. And it's going to put up a really good fight up against the upcoming Lexus IS 500 F Sport Performance, which I should be driving later on this summer. That's a car that also has a lovely engine with its 5-liter V8. However, it only comes in rear-wheel drive. It also has a rather dated interior as opposed to this car, which does feel modern, save for a couple of quibbles with that true touchpad interface, which I think Acura needs to just dump and go for a touchscreen. But other than that, this is a car that is extremely well-rounded, and I'm extremely pleased that Acura decided to take the Type S brand seriously again. And this car is every bit worthy of the badge, and it should be at the very top of your list if you guys are looking for a gas-powered, high-performance sports sedan with all-wheel drive and one that's built incredibly well. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my overview on this 2021 Acura TLX Type S. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.